While the Spartans had 300, the Persians had the Immortals. Now, in the previous video, I did tell you about the 300. This was a special force of the Spartans that was used to fight very tactful battles. It was the one force that if it was defeated, then the Greeks will know that they've lost everything. It was highly regarded among the Greeks. So while on their side, the Persians had their own special force that was also very highly trained. Its members were carefully selected and then trained, and they turned out to be the most valiant. This special force of the Persians was given the name of the Immortals, and it consisted of only Persians, people of Persian origin or descent, or of the Persian tribe. Remember, Persia as a kingdom was it had, or as an empire rather, was had so many tribes under it. There were the Medes and the Assyrians, and even Egyptians were under the Persian Empire at some point. There were so many, in fact, close to 100 of different nationalities who fell under the rule of the Persians. And the Persians did get recruit from all these other nations into its army. And I remember I've told you before that I found it's something I learned, that indeed the Persians had Africans amongst the troops, amongst their troops. There were Africans, black Africans, Ethiopians of East and West. I've explained these. And then, of course, the Egyptians formed part of their army. But when it came to this special force of the Immortals, they only a Persian would qualify to join, not even the Medes. And remember, the Medes were like very close to the Persians. They were, in fact, for other functions and other things, the Medes were considered to be as if they were indeed Persians. But when it came to the Immortals, only Persians could qualify to become members of the Immortals. Now, the Immortals, as I've said, were carefully selected and trained, and they were used for special tasks. When Xerxes reached Europe, and in fact, the first battle that he fought, his army fought with the Greeks, he lost a lot of soldiers, and that's because at first he didn't send in the Immortals. He sent in the general army, and these were massacred by the Spartans. 300, they were massacred, and it was a huge loss to Xerxes. Finally, Xerxes decided to deploy the Immortals, and that's when things changed. The Spartans were defeated, and in fact, the 300 where the movie 300 comes from, led by Leonidas, is it Leonidas? Yes, Leonidas, were defeated by the Immortals. And yeah, so that's how ruthless and efficient the Immortals were. Now, they were called the Immortals. The reason why they were called the Immortals is not because they could not die, even though that was the impression that title was meant to imply, that these were soldiers who would not die. They were immortal. The reason they were called immortal is because at any time their number had to be 10,000. That was their number. While the Spartans had theirs at 300, the special force, the Persians had theirs at 10,000. So at every moment, the number had to be 10,000, not more, not less. And that meant when one of them was killed at the battlefield, or something happened to them, or whatever happened to them, there were others who were already trained to just move in very quickly and just keep the number at 10,000. So whether it was at the battlefield or any other time, the number remained 10,000, and that's why they call it immortal, because that number never changed. It didn't matter they were at the battlefield and they were dying like flies. Others were coming in to fill that space and retain the number at 10,000. Now, Herodotus tells us that the immortal were very well taken care of by the king. And they were among all the soldiers the king had, they were the most adorned. Like, they wore gold on their body. Like, they wore gold in their fingers and on their body. They had a lot of gold. Even their weapons were covered with gold in one way or another. And they were also allowed, especially when going to expeditions that were far away from their home. They were the only ones who were allowed to travel with their concubines. Like, they had special carriages for their concubines, and they were allowed to travel with their concubines. So when they moved from Persia to Europe, they came along with their concubines, and their concubines were taken care of by the king. And they also, each of them had their own servants. They had servants who, Herodotus tells us that they were very well dressed, their servants, who were with them and taking care of their needs, especially once they come out of the battlefield. Yeah, the servant needed to make sure that the soldier was comfortable. Now, they were their provisions were carried or transported separate from the provisions of the other soldiers. So these people were taken care of in, like, the king knew that these were the people, the wall, that the last stand for his expedition. If these people are not well taken care of, then he could easily lose, and even lose his own life. So they were so well taken care of. Now, when Xerxes went to Europe, the person who, they also had their own commander, and the person who was in charge of the Immortals was Hydarnes, son of Hydarnes. Now, the father was a close associate of Darius, father of Xerxes, and in fact he was one of the 7 conspirators who enabled Darius to become the king of Persia. So Xerxes trusted this Hydarnes and gave him that responsibility. And the reason, one of the reasons why he trusted is because his own father was a very close confidant of his own father, Darius. So there was a long history between them. So Hydarnes was the one in charge of that army. Yeah, so the Persians, while the Greeks had 300, specifically the Spartans had 300, the Persians had the Immortals.